After a winter's worth of work and civilized craziness, we were eager to venture out onto the remote ice caps of British Columbia's coast mountains. In May 2001, our group of 5 skied and climbed for half a month on the glaciers and peaks of the Waddington and White Mantle ranges. We exited the mountains by kayaking for 1 week out Butte Inlet. Our goal, Mount Waddington, at 4,019 meters above sea level, is the highest peak in British Columbia. We hope to climb and ski its northwest peak. Our trip began at the Powell River Airport. We loaded our skis, packs, and kayaks onto 2 planes. One plane was bound for the logging camp at Scar Creek, the other for Waddington Harbor, where we planned to cache kayaks and food. Most of the coast mountains are remote and difficult to access, and is usually an adventure in itself just getting to the start of a trip. All 5 of us are involved in the ski and guiding industries, and we looked forward all winter to this playtime. The trip's members were Charles Albury, Mike Traslin, Andy Traslin, Joan Patterson, and Dave Sarkany. Our intended ski route was through the southwestern section of the Waddington Range. We hope to climb and ski the northwest peak of Mount Waddington, as well as other peaks in the region. We would then leave the Waddington Range and travel south through the White Mantle Range, finishing by dropping back into the Hamatco River's valley. To exit the mountains, our plan was to paddle out Butte Inlet to Desolation Sound, where we could access the mainland roads. We had 3 weeks' time and food to do this. Our budget was at around $600 per person. The Waddington White Mantle Ranges are located far from population centers, and the closest habitation, a logging operation in the Hamatco Valley, is only accessible by water and air. This range is known for having some of the planet's largest temperate glaciated regions. Bob Bates, our pilot, let us out at Potato Point on a log boom. Dan Scott, owner-supervisor with Waddington Logging, kindly allowed us to leave our kayaks and 1 week's worth of food at the operations log dump. He also arranged to have a truck left for us to drive to Scar Creek, 23 miles up the Hamatco River. Here we met the Traslin brothers, who flew in with the other plane. Our route took us up the mainline road by the Hamatco River, then up the Kula Creek Road. Our packs were pretty big. 16 days of food combined with mountaineering gear and skis produced a foot-flattening, spine-compressing load. From this point, the roads went up the north side of Scar Mountain, near the Waddington Glacier. At 1,000 meters, we found snow and got on our skis. We skied up and over Scar Mountain to avoid the ice falls of the lower Waddington Glacier. The coast mountains' close proximity to the Pacific Ocean guarantees a seemingly endless amount of storms. These hammer the range with rain, snow, and fierce winds. On leaving the shelter of the trees, we got the full blast of the wind and skied over Pivot Dome to access the Waddington Glacier.
With those 3 loaves of that run.
Instead of taking an intended high contour line, we dropped onto the Waddington Glacier. This meant we had to navigate an unknown icefall. Just after lunch, the wind very suddenly died out. It became warm, quiet, and really quite pleasant. The last day's storm created deep new snow, which made for difficult trail breaking. The morning dawned beautiful. No wind, just a big blue sky above. At the top of the Waddington Glacier, we got the first views of Mount Waddington. It was now midday and a high bank of cirrus clouds had drifted in. Seeing that a storm was approaching, we decided to make a run for our intended base camp. This was an express ride to the center of the Franklin Glacier complex, going beside 3,000-meter peaks such as Mount Monday, Spearman, and the Arabesque peaks.
It's an ugly feed. Smell.
During mid-afternoon, we were forced to do a 2-hour rest stop below the south face of Mount Waddington to wait for the evening to chill and solidify the snowpack. Later, wind and cloud motivated us to travel fast to get to our planned campsite at the Diaz and Franklin Glacier Junction. As we made camp, the storm moved in, and we were fairly certain the next day would be a rest day.
I've got an ugly, big foot. Rip. It hurts.
So day 7, we're stuck in a bit of a storm. It's definitely a very nice whiteout outside. You hear the snow on the tent, and it's going to be one of those days of just kind of taking it easy. I think all of us are pretty much thrashed. Hopefully we're going to go up, and we'll try to go up the northwest peak of Waddington tomorrow.
This may actually look kind of appealing, but you don't know the pain that this is to eat. There's only one cure for really bad food, and that's lots and lots of butter.
Lord.
Yum. Squish it in there and it melts.
That day we listened to the freight train-like sounds of the storm raging on the ridges above us. The next morning caught us off guard. We had slept in.
I think it's going to be a gorgeous day. I think we should go up to some high peak. My lips are falling apart and I'm actually finding them now inside of my tea because they're falling off when I take a sip. It's really quite sick.
For the first time in a couple of days, we could fully see Mount Waddington looming above us. The previous day's storm had covered the mountain in rime. It was apparent the summit would be out of condition for the day. We finished breakfast and got our gear together for skiing and climbing Mount Chris Spencer, a 3,009 meter peak to the northwest of Mount Waddington. The route to the mountain goes up the Franklin Glacier and beside the Fury Glacier's icefall. We hoped there would be less avalanche hazard as the slope we chose to climb and ski faced into the prevailing wind. A 300-meter climb took us to Chris Spencer's Summit Gully. Soon the gully got too icy to ski, so we started to kick steps. The climb also gave us a chance to view the ski route up the northwest peak of Mount Waddington. Charles and I decided to leave our skis 80 meters below the top of the gully, but Mike and Andy were intent on skiing the full length of this reasonably exposed slope. Reaching the summit ridge above the Scimitar Glacier was an absolutely exhilarating experience. The summit was a short, easy walk. At the top, the view to the south was obscured by clouds, but to the north we faced Mount Bell through to the Pantheon Range. Andy was the first to tackle the ice-hard, wind-compacted snow of the upper gully. The previous day's strong winds had created a very icy, rimed slope. At this unfortunate point, one of his bindings came loose. He was having some problems with misfitted bindings which he had recently wrapped with tensor bandage in an attempt to make his boots better fit his bindings. This created a pretty tense moment. A fall here in such a remote situation could have been devastating. Mike was next, followed by Charles and I.
Yeah, idiots.
That evening we ate a huge meal and got ready for a 3 a.m. start to go up Mount Waddington. The surrounding peaks glowed in the warm sunset. After coffee and oatmeal, we got dressed and headed up the Diaz Glacier.
Just gotta make another quarter liter of water and we're good to go.
Chilly minus 17 degrees caused squeaky snow and a very squeaky camera tape. Sunrise at 5:30 found us halfway up the Diaz icefall. A little later, we started having doubts about the weather. Mount Waddington's storm cap was starting to form. Wind and clouds were increasing, making our chances of reaching the summit less probable.
It's definitely a wind slab. You know, it's a big pocket. Who knows what happens as we get higher up the slope, closer to the ridge. Yeah, maybe the weather's kind of turning anyways too.
The head wall above us was steep and threatened to avalanche. An avalanche here would be very serious, as a 100-meter ice cliff lurked directly below. We made the hard but safe decision of turning back. Now we had a 1,200-meter run back down to camp. We packed our gear and headed down the Franklin Glacier's main trunk, passing many mountains and merging glaciers during the 14-kilometer glide. The weather continued to deteriorate. We made our camp at the Dauntless Glacier's junction at 1,400 meters.
Well, that was one big, long day. We didn't get up Waddington. There's bad weather. And, wind slabs. Wind slabs turned us around. So we went skied down and packed up camp and came down.
Do you like clam chowder?
Yeah. I'll eat anything at the moment.
This camp was a turning point for the trip, as we were leaving the high Waddington range and entering the White Mantle range. Our focus shifted to getting out. Food was starting to run low for the remote situation we were in. But for right then, all that mattered was the dry rock our camp was placed on, and the resulting luxury it afforded us after many days spent on the snow. In the morning, we lounged and enjoyed our dry veranda. The Waddington region rose behind the Franklin Glacier's icefall point. Later in the morning, Waddington melted out of the clouds.
What has the big beak?
Oh, you look like a duck.
Glacier burn was getting the better of some. Eventually we started the 1,000-meter climb up the Dauntless Glacier towards the Dauntless Vigilant Call. We skied through a small icefall in a whiteout and found a campsite on a ridge overlooking the Franklin Glacier. The morning was wonderful. We pushed through the call to get to the heart of the White Mantle Range. The Dauntless Vigilant Call is somewhat like a gate into the region, a narrow and steep gate. Our short journey in the White Mantle Range went through a couple of steep passes to reach the flat ice by White Mantle Mountain, the 3,000-meter peak we plan to ski over to get to the logging roads.
Yeah, baby.
This evening we placed camp at 2,400 meters in a broad pass between Barb and White Mantle Mountains. The weather was obviously taking a turn for the worse. A typical strengthening southerly wind combined with an ominous gray cloud cover warned us of the coming storm front. After a huge meal, we built walls to shelter the tents. Early in the morning, the storm arrived, shaking the tent. At this point, we had only one extra day's food. Being being stuck here for a few days would probably be a bad thing.
Oh, there. One full day in a tent. There's some pretty big blue holes all over the place. That's what we heard. Yeah, it's not too bad looking.
Get me the fuck out of this tent!
The morning brought us all we could ask for. White Mantle Peak and lots of unknowns stood between us getting to the closest logging roads. We figured this meant 2 or 3 days travel to the logging camp. By the time we had breakfast and dug the tents out, a building wind started to blow snow plumes off the ridge tops. Soon a gray cloud sheet was sliding over us. Another storm was coming our way.
About 3 days of food left. One-hander, throw it on your back. Much more comfortable.
We quickly packed up and ran for the summit of White Mantle. A skiable route goes around the summit, but we couldn't resist the top.
Yeah, that's true. That's the ridge over there, is it?
This one here, yeah. Shoot down.
Well, we're at the top of our 3,000 meter peak. We're running in front of a storm. It's gonna be here, I don't know, quite soon. Looking like it. Really gray sky, all the clouds are bubbling up, and it's strong southeast wind. So, looks like our route will go. We just gotta go around this peak, around the north side of it.
The northeast side of this peak provided the best run of the whole trip. It was hundreds of vertical meters of wintry powder snow. Across from Pointer Peak and above the White Mantle Glacier, we climbed over a narrow ridge to access the Scar Creek roads.
Hi. Good breaking.
At one point, an exposed rappel was needed to get off a pinnacle.
So much weight on there.
From there, we followed a narrow but skiable ridge crest. As we left the Alpine, the first snowflakes signaled the arrival of the next storm front. The morning brought pouring rain. After spending a couple of weeks in the Alpine, our senses were honed. The sights, smells, and sounds of new life emerging from the winter's snow melt dazzled us. An old logging road led us down to Scar Creek and then to the logging camp we left 2 weeks previous. At camp, we were offered bunks, food, and a ride to the beach where our kayaks waited.
This is what we really want. A shower.
Linda, the camp's cook, served us a huge, amazing meal. In the morning, Dan drove us down to Butte Inlet. He really had done so much for us. Now the work began.
We got enough food?
The food had to be retrieved from our hanging cache, and we had to prep our boats and gear for the paddle out.
Cheers!
One beer led to the opening of the wine sack. That afternoon, with heavy heads, we went about organizing the transition from skis to boats. We assembled the folding kayak. Neither Andy, Mike, or Charles had spent much time kayaking, so they took some time to paddle around and get accustomed to the boats. Using kayaks and skis, the lightest and smallest equipment available, is a beautiful experience. It provides truly intimate contact with the environment and requires and tests skill and judgment. In the morning, the winds were too strong for the rookie kayaker's first paddle. Finally, at around 3 p.m., it quietened and we launched.
Yuck.
Short squalls kept coming up the inlet, stirring things up. Andy's vintage boat proved to be a leaky sieve. He had to pump it dry every half hour for the rest of the trip. At one of the only beaches in the area, we met one of the locals. We hit the water with our paddles until the bear finally noticed us and left. The next morning was still stormy, with gusts blowing up to 60 kilometers an hour. It's really hard paddling into the wind for hours. If it's not a gust ripping your paddle away and potentially flipping the boat, then it's the large cresting waves which break and crash over the kayak, threatening a capsize if the paddler doesn't brace for the impact. The inlet full of fresh snow melt is cold, only a few degrees above zero, so swimming is a terrifying possibility. To make things even more interesting, most of the inlet's shoreline is rock wall, and beaches are very sparse. A full day paddle brought us to Hovel Cove, halfway out the inlet. Finally, we got a calm morning. Although the winds did pick up later in the day, it never got as windy as the previous days. We knew the perfect weather would hopefully give us wind-free travel for a couple of hours. In the afternoon, while paddling out the mouth of the inlet by Stewart Island, the wind and the riptide worked against us to create what was probably the most turbulent waters of the trip. Then we were out. We made a left turn and entered calm channel. With the wind behind us, it was smooth sailing to a camp we found on Raza Island.
Well, it took 5 days to get out of Butte Inlet, but we are now out and we're in calm channel. Beautiful campsite. It was 5 long, hard days of pulling up against the wind every single day.
We knew that we were home free now. Just one reasonably long 35-kilometer paddle, and we would be in the shelter of Oakover Inlet. It was warm and calm as we paddled through Lewis Channel. This was the first day of the trip that many of us didn't spend the whole day dressed in sweaters and toques. The tidal current in the area makes the place teem with life. Everyone was starting to get exhaustion coma when things got too comfortable. With calm sea conditions, we crossed Desolation Sound and made it into Oakover Inlet. Home was on an island in the middle of the inlet. A little rum put us to sleep. The next day felt like summer. Just 2 hours more paddling and we would be out and done. Our blistered hands and tired arms and backs needed rest. We all felt so good with what we'd accomplished during our 3 weeks holiday, and it particularly felt good to be over. It was a lazy, relaxing paddle. We could now feel we were returning. Motorboats, houses, fish and oyster farms were everywhere. We didn't summit the northwest peak of Waddington, but that truly didn't matter. We had put ourselves through a lot, and now it was time to relax and recover.
It's over! The white boat made it. The Titanic has landed.
The Titanic has landed.
Yeah.